In this video lesson, we'll describe the cultural and social interaction and exchange between the English settlers and the Native Americans in Virginia, and the effects of the Virginia's warfare and forced removal on Native Americans and white settlers. In 1607, Chief Powhatan's tribe dominated the tribes in the area in the so-called Powhatan Confederacy. The English at Jamestown referred to the native people in the area as Powhatans. Powhatan's people maintained contact with the English but kept their distance, regarding the English with suspicion because they were quick to become violent. Between 1610 and 1614, English settlers warred against the Powhatans, a conflict that had started over raids on Indian food supplies and escalated after the arrival of the new governor, Lord de la Warr. The governor, who was a veteran of wars against the Irish, introduced Irish tactics against the Indians, which included beheadings, taking their food, and destruction of their villages. The First Powhatan War ended in 1614 with a peace treaty that was sealed by the marriage of John Rolfe to the Chief Powhatan's daughter, Pocahontas. They can be seen here in this picture. This is a picture of Powhatan, who was the chief of the Powhatan Confederacy, and this is a picture of Pocahontas dressed as an Englishman. After Chief Powhatan died in 1618, his brother Opechancanough succeeded him and became Supreme Chief by 1622. At that time, he broke the peace in a series of attacks that killed 347 settlers, including John Rolfe. This First Powhatan War began over devastating epidemics and disease that affected the Native Americans because of the white settlers on their lands. After 1622, the English regarded the Chesapeake region Native Americans as perpetual enemies. The attacks ended the first phase of colonization in the Chesapeake and led to a series of changes. In 1644, the Second Powhatan War erupted as Powhatan made one final effort to push the Virginians out. The victorious English fended off the Powhatans and effectively banished them from the region in the Peace Treaty of 1646. By 1685, the English considered the Powhatan Indians extinct, victims of what we call the 3 Ds: disease, disorganization, and disposability. By 1612, John Rolfe had perfected techniques of growing and curing what had been a wild weed that they call tobacco. Tobacco could be grown virtually anywhere where there was enough water, and this created tension between the settlers and the Native Americans who already occupied the best land in the river valleys. The high demand for tobacco by Europeans also made the land more profitable, and the fact that tobacco ruined the soil after it had been planted year after year made land more in demand. It also required very hard labor, and the Virginia settlers were forced to rely on family members first to plant the crops. Then they started using indentured servants, and then ultimately will go to African slave labor to produce surpluses for exporting to Europe. In 1619, a Dutch warship appeared off Jamestown with the first cargo of African slaves. 20 of them were sold to buyers, setting the seeds of the African slave labor in the American colonies. You'll see tobacco is identified here as the first cash crop. This is what a tobacco plant looks like, and then when the leaves are pulled from the plant and dried, that's what they look like when they're hanging to dry. By 1700, approximately 100,000 settlers in the Chesapeake colonies of Virginia, Maryland, and North Carolina were growing tobacco. They were producing 35 million pounds for export and using indentured servants and African slaves to perform the labor. King James detested tobacco, and Virginia's legislative assembly, which was called the House of Burgesses, and he used the results of a royal investigation into Opechancanoug's 1622 uprising to revoke Virginia's charter. He then placed Virginia under his control as a royal colony. The investigation concluded that the high death rate from those Native American attacks was due to mismanagement by the Virginia Company, and control of the colony was taken from them. The House of Burgesses was left intact. However, laws passed by that body were subject to approval by Virginia's royal governor and the king and his council.